Hello everyone, so today I'll be showing you how I integrated K6 for performance testing with Salesforce, and I also utilized Grafana for the visualization purpose. So this is the basic flow which I have created for your better understanding. So the first prerequisite is that we have to create a Salesforce connected app. From there we'll get the client ID and client secret. Then K6 script would request Salesforce using these credentials and username and password of the org to request for the access token. Once the access token has been received, then K6 can trigger the API call, the respective API calls to Salesforce instance, and during this particular execution will be K6 will be tracking the performance metrics, and these metrics would be then sent to Grafana for visualization. So let's start. So starting with the Salesforce side, first we have to create a connected app. So from here in the app section and in the settings, you can proceed to the new connected app, and once you have configured the connected app, so this is the one which I'm currently using. I've already configured it, and once you have completed the configuration, you'll get the client ID and client secret. You can then save that and then proceed with the K6 scripts. So I'll be going through the code so that if anyone who is new to K6 can basically understand the foundations. So let's start. So initially we are importing relevant classes and functions. So for instance, check and sleep, they are from K6. So check is used to validate the HTTP responses. Secondly, we have sleep. It is used to pause executions during any performance tests we are executing. Secondly, we are importing HTTP from K6. HTTP, it is basically a built-in module, and it is used to make the HTTP request. So if we proceed to this, you can see that we have our get functions being written, which we are just simply utilizing in the script. Thirdly, we are importing some classes. These are some performance metric classes, and here we are creating instance of these classes. So for instance, in the login duration, let me show you. So yeah, in this we are simply adding, we first store the current time before executing the post request, and then once we have got the response, then we are storing the time it required. So the current time, then it is subtracted from the start time. So that is being stored in the login duration, things like that. And then we have the second thing is this is basically a plain JavaScript object that holds configuration details like client ID, client secret, username, password, and things like that. Currently, we are injecting these values from the CLI, and that is basically a good practice since we don't want our important and essential credentials being exposed in the code. So I've also added explanation in this mind map which I have created. So when we are configuring these details, we have two options. Either we can use environment variables, so we'll be inputting these specific credentials in the CLI. I'll be showing you I'll show you right away. So this is basically the complete command. So you can see that using this we are hitting our K6 requests in order to execute our test file, and you can see that all the details are in the CLI, the org username, the password details. So I'm not inputting any detail inside the code, which is a good practice, I believe. Otherwise, if you just want to do it for the testing part for temporary basis, you can just simply input the credentials directly in the standard object inside config. Moving forward, one question which would get raised in your mind is that regarding the metrics which we are using. So one question would be that why we're not just saving these simple details regarding, for instance, the time which we saved in a variable. So why we're not just saving them in simple variables, why we are importing classes and then making instance of them and then storing the details again. So the reason is that K6, if we would use simple variables and store these performance metrics inside them, then K6 won't record them in the test summary. So at the very end, when the test execution completes, we would want a proper report, generated report, in which it's very easier to see what metrics have been displayed. So by default, K6 won't be able to record it in the test summary. So this is the reason these classes have been imported, because by default K6 would at runtime would be picking the relevant matrices. So K6 would be fetching these details at runtime automatically, and that would solve our additional effort. The reason is that K6 won't record simple variables in the test summary. So at the very end, when our test execution completes, an HTML report gets generated, and at runtime during the test executions, K6 automatically collects all these metrics during the test execution, and then at the finally when we have completed our test execution, it simply maps them onto that HTML report. So this is the reason we are following the default methodology. Moving forward, we are also importing HTML report. So this is the report which I was talking about. So this is basically it's a custom, or you can say third-party function that is used to generate an HTML formatted summary report. Moving forward, yeah, this is K6 global object which provides test control. So K6 automatically looks for this option object to control things like number of users. So currently, just for the testing purpose, I'll be utilizing only one virtual user. The duration, secondly, so duration would be 30 seconds of the entire test suite. Thirdly, we have set some thresholds. So this means that 95% of the login must complete within 6 seconds. And the second threshold says that at least 95% of the login attempts must succeed. So these are basically the criteria which we are telling to the K6 to set the thresholds for. Moving forward, then we have two constants. So this stores this thing. So this is basically would be used later in the code, in which through which we'll be telling Salesforce what to expect in the body when we are making a request. Secondly, then we are also setting the grant type, which I'll be telling you which grant type we'll be using and why. And then we have the respective functions. We'll be jumping to them one by one, but we'll start our execution from the main function. So this is the main function from where our execution starts. So let's begin. So starting with, I already explained it, we are storing the current time in a constant, then we are proceeding with a try block. So here we are sending the standard object as an argument to this particular function. So let's proceed over here. So over here you can see that we are simply extracting the properties from this object, and then we are confirming whether all these fields inside that object are they empty or not. So if they're empty, then we'll simply log an error and we'll also console it. Otherwise, if all of them have the value inside it, so basically the object has the structure as key and value. So we are simply using a for loop and then looping around that whether the client ID, client secret, username and password in that object, are they all set. If any of them is empty, we're gonna throw an error. Otherwise, we're gonna return that object with an additional parameter, that is the grant type, since we have not explicitly added that detailed in the object. So before that objects get further, so in this method we are simply looping around the object properties, and we are confirming that the client ID, client secret, username and password, which are supposed to be structured as key and value, in which client ID acts as a key and then will have a value against it. So we are just confirming if all of these things are not empty. If any of them is empty, we're gonna throw an error and we'll also console it. Otherwise, we're gonna return the object with an additional thing, that is the grant type. So we had another choice too, that was the authorization code grant, but in authorization code grant we are dependent on a user to input credentials visually on the screen. So we won't want that kind of stuff when we are executing K6 requests, since the goal is to get the response as soon as possible without any intervention in between. So that is the reason we are going for the password grant type. Moving forward, now my payload constant is set with all the relevant things: grant time, grant type, client ID, client secret, and all the necessary stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hit the post request. So this is basically the URL you're sending the post request to, the Salesforce OAuth token endpoint. That is, you can proceed to this is basically that endpoint which you're trying to hit. And then we have payload, which are all these credentials which we just received. And lastly we have the header section, so in which we are storing the content type. So this is basically through this we are telling Salesforce how to interpret the body in the post request. So we are telling Salesforce to expect a JSON body. So that is basically being told in this request. Moving forward, we have the login duration, which I already explained, and secondly we are storing the status. So if we have got the 200 status, then an increment would be done in the login success variable. So finally then we set a if condition that if the status is not 200, then simply we have to increment the token errors and we have to console that the login attempt has failed. Otherwise, that means that we have got the 200 response, and that means that this response now potentially expects to have the access token, but still for the confirmation we'll need to extract the details from this response. So for that purpose we'll be sending this to this function. Here we have set number of checks to confirm that the status is 200 or not, it has access token or not, and things like signature, the instance URL, or all the stuff relevant to that. And then further we'll have some other checks, relevant checks, if the URL is valid or not, and finally we're gonna return two things, that is the access token and the instance URL, since those two things would be required in the future. So now moving back again to the main method. So then finally we get the response over here, and then we are confirming if. So this is basically a truthy check in JavaScript. So it is used to confirm whether validated response in this current situation it is not null or undefined before proceeding. So if it's not null, then we'll enter into this section, and then we'll check, and then we're gonna call this Salesforce object function where we're gonna send these two specific things. Now moving to this function. So here we're gonna do the relevant get request. Then this is basically a truthy check in which so this is basically a truthy check in JavaScript in which it is used to confirm whether validated response which we just received, it is not null or undefined. So if it is not null, then we're gonna proceed, and then we're gonna just simply call this function where we're gonna send these two things. So now finally we have entered to the Salesforce object function, and over here we're gonna hit the get request. So if we proceed to the documentation, the official documentation of Salesforce, so you can see that in order to fetch any object's schema, so for instance accounts object, so we're gonna use this particular request. So if we proceed to the documentation, we can see that in order to fetch the object schema, so here's the one. So this URI specifically, it completely describes the individual metadata at all levels for the specified object. For example, this can be used to retrieve the fields, URLs, things like that. So that is being currently done over here. We are just trying to fetch the accounts related. So if we proceed to the documentation, the official documentation, let me open it, give me just, so here's the one. So we are using the REST API. The official documentation has specified the REST API to utilize in order to fetch the accounts object schema. So that is being done over here. So now what we are doing is, so we are using the access token and requesting the get request, and if the response is 200, then we are returning check. Then check would be returned as a boolean value as true. uh, so we'll get a true in the response. So if the response is true, then we're gonna proceed and we're gonna encode. So if it's true, so if it is true, then we're gonna create a socle query, and then again proceed with the get request to access 5 records. We have set the limit to 5 in the query, and we'll be fetching the ID, name, details of the 5 records from the accounts object, and again we're gonna use the access token which was provided to us. So if the response received from the get request is 200, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna extract the record array. So if the response is 200, we're gonna extract the record array from the JSON body, from the response, and then another condition would be that if the records exists and the array is not empty, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna log those records in the console in a JSON format. Otherwise we're gonna say that no accounts records have been found. So this is basically the complete flow, and here we're gonna end our try block and initiate the catch block to log the specific things and increment any metrics which we discussed earlier, these one. So yeah, this was basically overall explanation of how things are getting mapped against the functions in this entire script. And now let me execute. Just give me a second. So I guess we already have, no, we do not have that request. So I'm going to inject the specific credentials using the CLI method, and now we're going to run the test. So currently it's demanding the API token for the Grafana part. So let me show you how we're going to do that. So this is my Grafana dashboard. So I already have executed one test. So in the performance section, let's delete this test. I'm gonna create a new one. So this is basically the token which Grafana provides to us, and we're gonna simply input that over here. So yeah, now we're gonna confirm whether the Grafana is empty or not. So yeah, it's now currently empty. Now when I hit this request, we got an error. The model isn't. So now I'm gonna execute it. So you can see that only one virtual user is being utilized, and you can see account records have been fetched. We'll also confirm these from the specific org. So this was a org. If we proceed to the accounts, so you can see that similar information has been fetched. Grand hotels. So yeah, you can see that it is fetching the data. Edge communication, yes, this is the one. So yeah, it's correctly fetching the accounts object schema, and our test has been completed successfully. Now if we proceed to the Grafana section, so in here, yes, we have instantly got the request, and you can see that we've got a visualized report capturing all the specific metrics regarding the performance testing. These are the requests which we executed, and it's capturing all the responses, the status code, things like that. So I'll be doing another session in which I'll be targeting, my focus would be more on the how to interpret these performance metrics in the Grafana dashboard. But for now, I guess this was enough in order to understand how we can do the integration between these three entities. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope it was a new concept. Thank you very much.